Welcome to Wisdom for the Present, where we take ancient truth and bring it into clear, modern understanding. This episode uses AI-generated narration based on human-researched and written material.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, so imagine being part of, like, the most powerful, well-connected family in an entire empire.
Right.
You are literal royalty.
Yeah.
The government actually owes its existence to your ancestors. You have the best land, the highest status, the utmost security.
You're untouchable, basically.
Exactly, untouchable.
Yeah.
And then fast forward just a few generations, your descendants are stripped of everything.
Yeah, everything is just gone.
Right. They were being worked to death in mud pits under the whip. And this is the darkest part, their newborn babies are being ripped from their arms and thrown into rivers by the state.
It's horrific.
It is. And the question is, how does a society turn that fast? I mean, how does a government go from honoring a people to systematically trying to erase them?
It is a profound shift to wrap our minds around. I mean, it really is.
It's the absolute definition of narrative whiplash. Because usually when we look at historical narratives, we expect, a smooth arc.
Right, a clean storyline.
Yeah, like a hero emerges, faces a challenge, overcomes it, and we get this linear story from point A to point B. But the text we are diving into today completely shatters that expectation.
Oh, for sure.
We are entering a historical and spiritual landscape that is, frankly, turbulent, violent, and incredibly messy.
We're looking at a civilization going from the penthouse to the prison almost overnight.
Right. And that whiplash is the perfect launch pad for what we are doing today. Welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive into the first 15 chapters of the book of Exodus.
It's going to be an intense one.
Very intense. Our mission is to act as your guides, helping you extract the practical wisdom, the moral insight, and the real-world application from this ancient text.
Because we're moving far beyond mere history here.
Exactly. We want to uncover how a narrative that is thousands of years old actually challenges the way you think, lead, suffer, and pursue a meaningful life today.
And to accomplish this, we are drawing on a very specific stack of foundational sources.
Yes. Tell them what we've got.
So we are examining the biblical text itself, specifically the World English Bible Translation. But to truly understand the depth of what is happening, we're pairing that text with the historical and theological analyses of two absolute titans of biblical commentary.
Right.
Albert Barnes and Matthew Henry. They are going to help us look beneath the surface of the narrative.
And we really need them, because let's start with the sheer political terror of the opening scene. We have to understand the world the author is addressing.
Yeah, context is everything here.
It is. So the text deliberately links us back to the end of the book of Genesis, reminding us that only 70 people, Jacob's family, originally migrated to Egypt.
Just a tiny group.
Right. And at that time, Joseph, an Israelite, was the second most powerful man in the nation. He had engineered the economic survival of Egypt during a devastating famine.
He basically saved the world as they knew it.
He did. His family was completely untouchable. But then we get this chilling transition in the text. It says, Joseph died, as did all his brothers, and all that generation.
And that phrase, it marks the end of an era and the beginning of a demographic phenomenon.
Yeah, things change fast.
Very fast. The text begins piling up these repetitive verbs to describe what happens next. It says the Israelites were, quote, fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and grew exceedingly mighty.
Wow, that's a lot of adjectives.
It is. And the phrasing is almost meant to sound unnatural, like an explosive, uncontrollable growth. The text says the land was filled with them.
I want to pause on that explosive growth, because it triggers the entire crisis. We read in Exodus chapter 1, verse 8, now there arose a new king over Egypt who didn't know Joseph.
Right.
And I look at that and I immediately think, hold on, how do you just forget the guy who literally saved your entire empire from starvation?
It seems impossible, right?
It feels like deliberate political amnesia. It's like a hostile corporate takeover where the new CEO comes in and entirely dismantles the legacy of the beloved founder just to consolidate power.
That is a very sharp way to look at it, because Albert Barnes provides some vital historical context here that proves this wasn't just accidental forgetfulness.
Oh, really? So it was intentional?
Completely intentional.
Yeah.
Barnes points out that this new king likely represented an entirely new dynasty.
Okay.
You see, Egypt had been previously conquered and ruled by a group of foreigners known as the Hyksos, or the shepherd kings.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So when native Egyptians finally overthrew the Hyksos and regained control, they harbored this deep-seated, virulent xenophobia, a massive cultural hatred and fear of any foreigners living in their land.
Oh, I see. So the Israelites, who were shepherds and foreigners themselves, suddenly look like a massive fifth column.
Exactly.
They look like the people who just got kicked out.
Precisely. So Pharaoh looks at this exploding demographic and makes a cold, calculating political speech. He says, "Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we."
Wait, were they actually mightier?
Well, Matthew Henry notes something fascinating about this. They probably weren't actually mightier at all.
So he's lying.
Pharaoh is a dictator manipulating the facts. He needed the Israelites to be perceived as a terrifying existential threat to justify his extreme policies.
Oh, man. That is so familiar.
Right. His stated fear is that if a war breaks out, this minority group will ally with Egypt's enemies and fight against them.
It is literal state-sponsored paranoia.
Yeah.
He manufactures a crisis to justify a brutal solution.
Yeah.
And his solution is, he says, come, let's deal wisely with them. I mean, I read the word wisely in the text, and it just drips with cynicism.
Oh, yeah. It's incredibly dark.
Because by wisely, he means instituting a system of crushing forced labor. He assigns taskmasters, forces them to build the massive storage cities of Pithom and Ramses, and makes them serve with absolute rigor in mortar and brick.
It is the weaponization of the economy against a specific demographic.
Wow, yeah.
But the paradox of the text is that Pharaoh's calculated oppression completely backfires.
Wait, how does it backfire?
Well, the more the Egyptians afflict them, the more the Israelites multiply and spread.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, Matthew Henry actually quotes a brilliant ancient Latin maxim to describe this. It's sub ponder crescit, which translates to being pressed, it grows.
Being pressed, it grows. I love that.
Right. Henry draws a direct line between this and the persecution of the early Christian church centuries later, where, the blood of the martyrs became the seed of the church.
So pressure actually fuels the growth.
Exactly. True resilience often requires the pressure of opposition to activate it.
But even with that resilience, the reality of their suffering is horrific. We can't gloss over that.
No, absolutely not.
Henry has a profoundly sobering quote about this sudden shift in their fortunes. He writes, "The place of our satisfaction may soon become the place of our affliction."
That is a heavy thought.
It hit me so hard. You think about your own life. You feel secure because you have a great job, a stable government, a comfortable home. And then a new king arises who knows not Joseph.
Right. Management changes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The economy turns, a health crisis hits, and the very place where you felt the most secure becomes your prison.
It really forces us to confront the fragility of earthly security.
It does.
And it asks us to look at how fear of the other, whether we see it in our own political systems or communities, or even our corporate environments, how it inevitably descends into systemic cruelty.
Because Pharaoh's fear spirals completely out of control.
It does. When the forced labor doesn't stop the population growth, he escalates from economic oppression to state-mandated genocide.
It's awful. He explicitly commands the Hebrew midwives to murder the baby boys the moment they are born.
And here's a detail that I find absolutely stunning about that moment.
Yeah.
The author of this text records the names of the two midwives, Shifra and Puah. Think about the subversion happening here. The pharaoh, the man claiming to be a living god, the most powerful man on the planet, isn't given a name in this entire chapter. He is reduced to a generic title.
That's such a good point.
But these two lowly, marginalized female slaves are etched into permanent history by name.
Shifa and Puah.
Exactly. They are immortalized because of their moral courage. They engaged in what we could call a profound act of pious disobedience.
Pious disobedience. I like that phrase. What does the text say they actually did?
It tells us that they feared God and didn't do what the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the baby boys alive.
Wow. But they had to face Pharaoh for that.
They did.
Yeah.
Pharaoh hauls them in and demands an explanation for why the boys are surviving.
And what do they say?
They use a very clever, somewhat subversive excuse. They claim the Hebrew women are simply too vigorous, and they give birth before the midwives can even arrive.
Okay, I have to ask about that, because they are essentially lying to a dictator. Does the text condemn them for that deception?
That's a great question. Matthew Henry addresses this directly. He suggests that while their excuse might not have been the complete truth, their underlying motivation was a reverence for life.
Right.
And a fear of God that superseded their fear of the state. Henry notes that God rewarded their core moral integrity.
How so?
Well, because they protected the families of the Israelites, the text says God dealt well with the midwives and gave them families of their own. Literally, he built them houses.
So for you listening to this right now, the translation into your daily life is about identifying the Pharaoh in your own ecosystem.
That's exactly it.
It might be an unjust system, a toxic corporate culture that demands you lie for the company, or an unreasonable expectation that forces you to compromise your core values.
And the question is, how can you practice the quiet, defiant integrity of Shifra and Pua?
Right. How do you choose moral courage over compliance when the stakes are terrifying?
And that tension is exactly where the narrative shifts gears.
Yeah, we move from the big picture to something very intimate.
Right. We have been looking at the macro level, an entire nation crushed under systemic bondage. Now, the text zooms in with cinematic precision to the micro level.
Just one single hidden baby.
Exactly. We are about to witness the making of an unlikely leader in the crucible of absolute obscurity.
Because the situation is desperate at this point.
Yeah.
Pharaoh has bypassed the midwives entirely and ordered all his people to throw every newborn Hebrew boy directly into the Nile River.
State-sanctioned murder.
Yeah. And in the midst of this terror, a Levite woman gives birth to a son. She hides him for 3 months, and when she can't conceal his cries any longer, she makes a desperate move.
She really has no choice.
No choice at all. She takes a papyrus basket, coats it in tar and pitch to make it waterproof, puts her baby inside, and places it among the reeds in the very river that Pharaoh designated as a mass grave.
And his older sister stands far off to see what will happen.
Right. And this sequence is, frankly, a masterclass in the irony of divine providence.
Oh, absolutely. Down comes Pharaoh's own daughter to bathe at the river.
Of all people.
Right. She spots the basket, opens it, and sees the crying child. The text notes she has compassion on him, recognizing immediately that this is one of the Hebrews' children.
And at that exact moment, the baby's sister steps out of the reeds.
Which takes so much guts.
So much guts. And she offers to find a Hebrew nurse for the child. Pharaoh's daughter agrees.
And the brilliance of this is almost comical. The sister goes and gets the baby's actual mother.
It's amazing.
So Pharaoh's daughter hands the child back to his own mother and says, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages."
It is staggering. I mean, Matthew Henry highlights the sheer humor and justice of this reversal.
He really does.
He says just at the time when Pharaoh's cruelty rose to this height, the deliverer was born.
Not only does God use Pharaoh's own daughter to save the child, but Pharaoh's administration is literally paying the child's mother to raise the exact man who will eventually dismantle their entire empire.
You can't write a better script.
No, it's incredible. So Moses is raised in the palace. He receives an elite Egyptian education, access to the highest levels of power, and all the privileges of royalty.
But he knows who he really is. He knows he is Hebrew.
Right, he never forgets that.
And this leads to a massive collision when he turns 40, because he goes out to observe the burdens of his people, and he sees an Egyptian taskmaster brutally beating a Hebrew.
It's a turning point.
Huge turning point. Moses looks this way and that, sees no one, strikes the Egyptian down, kills him, and hides his body in the sand.
And that action is pivotal, and it immediately unravels his life.
How fast does it fall apart?
Instantly. Because the very next day, Moses goes out again and sees two Hebrew men fighting each other.
Okay.
He tries to intervene, asking the aggressor why he is striking his companion, and the man turns on Moses with a devastating question.
What does he say?
He says, "Who made you a prince and a judge over us? Do you plan to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?"
Oh, man. That moment must have been terrifying. Moses realizes his secret is completely out.
Yeah, his cover is blown.
He thought he was being this anonymous vigilante, but the very people he was trying to protect are rejecting him and exposing him.
Exactly.
He realizes Pharaoh will hear of this, so he flees for his life out of Egypt, across the desert to the land of Midian. But let's stop and unpack that rejection.
Yeah, it's worth digging into.
Who made you a prince and a judge over us? Why do they turn on him so aggressively?
Well, Matthew Henry points out that Moses was attempting to offer them his service. He felt a righteous indignation, a genuine passion to deliver his oppressed brothers.
Right.
But he went about it through his own strength, relying on violence and secrecy.
He just assumed they'd follow him.
Exactly. He assumed that because he had the palace education and the passion, the Israelites would automatically recognize him as their leader.
But he had zero relational capital with them.
None. He was an outsider in Egyptian clothes trying to mandate justice.
It is the ultimate cautionary tale for young leaders.
It really is.
It's like a a hotshot MBA graduate walking onto a manufacturing floor on their first day and trying to unilaterally restructure the entire assembly line.
Oh, they would be destroyed.
Completely laughed out of the building because the foreman had been sweating there for 20 years.
Right.
Moses had the passion and the vision, but he completely lacked the authority, the humility, and the timing. He tried to force the deliverance by his own hand, and it blew up in his face.
And we really must exercise some careful discernment here regarding Moses killing the Egyptian.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because a modern reader looks at this and rightly asks, wait, our hero starts his journey by committing premeditated vigilante murder.
It's a very fair question, and Matthew Henry carefully navigates this.
What does he say?
He notes that Moses was likely acting under a specific internal divine prompting tied to his unique historical calling as a national deliverer.
So it was an awkward, premature attempt at his actual mission.
Exactly. It was clumsy. But Henry explicitly cautions us that this narrative is, quote, not a precedent in ordinary cases.
That's an important distinction.
Very important. We cannot use this ancient text to justify modern vigilante justice or taking the law into our own hands. We must distinguish between a specific historical epoch of deliverance and everyday ethical conduct.
I'm really glad you clarified that, because the takeaway here isn't about striking down your enemies. The real takeaway is what happens next.
The consequences.
The consequence of his failure is a 40-year exile. Moses goes from being a prince in the most advanced civilization on earth to sitting by a well in the desert of Midian.
It's a massive demotion.
Massive. He ends up helping the daughters of a local priest water their flocks, settles down, marries one of the names Zipporah, and spends the next 4 decades working as a shepherd for his father-in-law.
4 decades.
4 decades. Why did God require such a massive, seemingly wasteful time out for Moses?
Because of what the isolation of Midian provided that the luxury of Egypt simply could not.
To unpack that for me.
So Moses' life is famously divided into 3 neat 40-year chapters. 40 years as a prince, 40 years as a shepherd, and finally 40 years leading the nation.
Right.
Henry makes a profound observation about this middle period. He says Egypt gave Moses an education. It made him a scholar, a statesman, a military thinker.
Yeah.
But the wilderness of Midian gave him something far superior. It gave him contemplation, devotion, and profound humility.
He had to be stripped of his ego.
Exactly. He had to learn how to patiently lead a flock of dumb, stubborn sheep across a barren landscape for 40 years before he was anywhere near ready to shepherd a stubborn nation of people through that exact same wilderness.
Oh, wow. The arrogance of the Egyptian prince had to be baked out of him in the desert sun.
That's a great way to put it.
And I think this is where the text speaks most intimately to the listener today.
Think about where you are currently in your own Midian phase.
We all have one. So many of us go through seasons where we feel totally sidelined. Maybe you were passed over for a promotion, or you are stuck in a career that feels utterly disconnected from your passion.
Or you are at home doing the repetitive, unseen work of raising toddlers.
Yes. You feel like your potential is rotting in obscurity. You think, I was meant for the palace, and here I am cleaning up after sheep.
But the wisdom of this text challenges that frustration completely.
How so?
It asks you to consider how this exact period of obscurity, this quiet, frustrating wilderness, might be the precise character-forming preparation you need for your true purpose.
Because God doesn't waste the wilderness.
Never.
But the wilderness eventually ends. And that brings us to one of the most famous encounters in human literature.
The burning bush.
Yes. Moses is 80 years old now. He is out keeping the flock near Mount Horeb, and he sees a physical impossibility.
A thorn bush is on fire, blazing with heat and light. But the wood and the leaves are not burning up. It is not consumed.
The visual alone is just arresting. Moses says, I will turn aside now and see this great sight, why the bush is not burned.
And as he approaches, the voice of God calls out to him from the midst of the fire, commanding him to take off his sandals.
Because the ground he is standing on is holy. Now, Matthew Henry has a beautiful interpretation of that burning bush. What does it actually symbolize?
Henry suggests that the burning bush is a direct emblem of the Israelites back in Egypt.
Oh, really? Not a symbol of God?
Well, God is the fire, but the bush represents the people. They are a lowly, thorny bush, not a grand cedar, and they are currently engulfed in the fires of brutal affliction in the brick kilns.
Oh, I see.
But because the presence of God is with them in the fire, they are not consumed. They are surviving the unsurvivable.
That is profound.
It really is. God then reveals his intention to Moses. He says he has seen the affliction of his people. He has heard their cry under their taskmasters. He knows their sorrows, and he is coming down to deliver them.
And then he drops the bombshell on Moses.
Right. He says, "Come now, therefore, and I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people out of Egypt."
And this is the moment Moses has theoretically been waiting 40 years for. But his reaction is the complete opposite of the brash, violent 40-year-old who struck down the Egyptian.
It's completely different.
He instantly starts backpedaling. He offers a rapid-fire string of excuses.
A lot of excuses.
His first response is, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the children of Israel out?"
It is a staggering display of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, it really is. 40 years earlier, he assumed he was a savior. Now he is convinced he is a nobody.
And God answers that first excuse not by building up Moses' self-esteem, but by promising his own presence. He says, "Certainly I will be with you."
But Moses pushes back again. He says, "Okay, but when I go to the Israelites and say, 'The God of your father sent me,' they're going to ask, 'What is his name?' What do I tell them?"
And this yields one of the most profound theological declarations in history.
Tell me about it.
God says, "I am who I am." He tells Moses, "You shall tell the children of Israel this, I am has sent me to you."
What does that actually mean? It sounds kind of abstract.
It does, but Albert Barnes provides brilliant clarity here. He notes that the name I am that I am expresses absolute, unchanging, and eternal being.
Okay.
Remember the context here. Egypt was a land of countless deities. Gods of the river, gods of the sun, gods of fertility.
Right, a huge pantheon.
But they were all localized and limited. By calling himself I am, Yahweh is declaring that he is self-existent and self-sufficient. He doesn't derive his power from nature. He is the reality behind all existence.
Wow.
And that absolute, unshakable reality is the bedrock foundation for the promise he is making to deliver the slaves.
So Moses has the creator of reality itself speaking to her from a miraculous fire, promising to be with him.
Yeah.
But Moses still isn't buying it.
He's incredibly stubborn.
He throws out a third excuse. But behold, they will not believe me, nor listen to my voice.
And God responds by giving him tangible miracles.
Right, the signs.
Yes. Turning his shepherd's staff into a serpent and back again, and turning his hand leprous and healing it. He gives him undeniable proof.
And yet Moses tries a fourth time. He says, "O Lord, I am not eloquent, neither before now, nor since you have spoken to your servant, for I am slow of speech and of a slow tongue."
He argues with a burning bush about his public speaking skills.
I love how human this is. I mean, if you read between the lines, Moses is essentially saying, look, I stutter, I freeze up. You need a charismatic orator to persuade Pharaoh, and I am a grumpy, isolated shepherd who hasn't spoken to a politician in 40 years. Please send someone else.
Henry breaks down this reluctance with incredible empathy.
What does Henry say?
He points out that Moses was a brilliant philosopher and a deep thinker, but perhaps he genuinely lacked natural rhetorical fluency. Henry writes, "A great deal of wisdom and true worth is concealed by a slow tongue."
That's a beautiful way to phrase it.
It is. But look at how God addresses this perceived physical limitation. God asks him, "Who has made man's mouth? Or who makes one mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Isn't it I, Yahweh?"
So God doesn't dispute Moses' lack of eloquence.
No, he simply asserts his sovereignty over our human frailties.
But I want to push back on Moses' behavior here, because we really need to differentiate between healthy humility and toxic self-doubt.
That's a crucial distinction.
Because humility is saying, I can't do this on my own. Toxic self-doubt is saying, I can't do this, even with the creator of the universe backing me up.
Right.
Moses crosses the line. The text actually says the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. He was allowing his fear to masquerade as humility.
And we do that all the time.
We do. How do we spot that in our own lives?
We spot it when we make our limitations bigger than our resources.
Oh, say that again.
Toxic self-sabotage focuses entirely on the deficit. It says, I don't have the degree, I don't have the charisma, I don't have the network, and completely ignores the reality of the help being offered.
Which is exactly what Moses was doing.
Exactly. Moses was stubbornly ignoring the fact that God just promised to be with his mouth. But here's the beauty of the text. God is intensely gracious even in his anger.
How so?
He doesn't magically rewire Moses' brain to make him a master orator. Instead, he provides a structural solution.
The brother.
Yes. He says, what about Aaron, your brother? I know that he can speak well. He will be your spokesman.
I think the practical application here is to ruthlessly audit your own excuses.
Oh, for sure.
When you are avoiding a massive life change, a terrifying career leap, or a difficult conversation, are your reasons based on a genuine lack of capacity, or are you just masking your terror?
Are you saying I can't when you really mean I'm too scared to try?
Exactly. And just like God provided Aaron for Moses, look around your own life. What resources, mentors, partners, or tools are available to you right now to bridge the gap of your own limitations?
You don't have to be perfectly equipped.
No. You just have to move forward with the errands provided to you.
And Moses finally accepts the mission. He packs up his family, takes his shepherd's staff, which the text now calls the rod of God, and begins the long journey back to the epicenter of global power.
Which launches us into the great collision of powers.
Here we go.
Moses and Aaron walk into the court of Pharaoh and deliver the demand. Thus says Yahweh, the God of Israel, let my people go.
And Pharaoh's response is the ultimate flex of imperial arrogance.
It's so dismissive.
He looks at them and says, "Who is Yahweh that I should listen to his voice to let Israel go? I don't know Yahweh, and I will not let Israel go."
I mean, you have to understand Pharaoh's worldview. He views himself as the divine incarnate.
Right.
To him, the gods of enslaved peoples are, by definition, weak, defeated gods. A demand from this unknown deity of a subjugated minority isn't just absurd, it is deeply offensive to his authority.
And he retaliates with devastating administrative cruelty.
He goes straight for the economic jugular. He tells the taskmasters to stop providing the straw that the Israelites need to make mud bricks.
But with a catch.
A huge catch. He demands that they produce the exact same daily quota of bricks. Now, the slaves have to spend hours scavenging for stubble in the fields and then somehow still make the same amount of bricks.
It is an impossible metric designed to completely break them.
It's a classic tactic of a tyrant.
Yeah.
You make the conditions of the oppressed so unbearable that they turn against the very people advocating for their freedom.
And the tactic works flawlessly.
It does. The Israelite foremen are beaten when they miss their quotas. They walk out of Pharaoh's office, see Moses and Aaron, and absolutely unleash on them.
What do they say?
They say, "May Yahweh look at you and judge, because you have made us a stench to be smelled by Pharaoh, to put a sword in their hand to kill us."
And Moses is devastated by this. He turns right back to God and complains.
Yeah, he basically says, "Why did you even send me? Since I spoke in your name, you haven't rescued your people at all. You've just made their lives exponentially worse."
It is a profound moment of crisis, and Matthew Henry summarizes this dynamic perfectly.
Give it to me.
He writes, "The lowest ebbs go before the highest tides."
The lowest ebbs go before the highest tides.
Yes. He points out a psychological truth. Stepping into your true calling or initiating necessary systemic change rarely results in immediate peace. It almost always brings immediate, violent pushback.
That makes so much sense.
The friction, the worsening of conditions, is actually proof that the toxic system is finally being challenged.
That is such a vital truth for anyone trying to change a destructive pattern in their own life. If you try to set a healthy boundary with an abusive family member or call out a toxic dynamic at work, the immediate result isn't usually a peaceful resolution.
No, it's usually an explosion.
The system fights back. But God reassures Moses that this is only the beginning. He says, "Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh."
And then the plagues begin.
Yes, the 10 plagues.
This is where we see a systematic dismantling of an empire.
And the text outlines 10 specific ones. Right? Let's list them really quick.
Sure, we have the water of the Nile turning to blood, frogs, lice, flies, a devastating disease on the livestock, boils on human skin, catastrophic hail, locusts devouring the crops, 3 days of thick, palpable darkness, and finally, the terrible threat against the firstborn.
Now, a casual reader looks at that list and thinks it's just a random assortment of magical punishments, like just God throwing everything in the kitchen sink at Pharaoh.
Right, just chaos.
But it's far more precise than that, isn't it?
Much more precise. Albert Barnes provides crucial insight into the mechanism of these plagues.
What did he say?
He notes that they are highly progressive and deeply theological. They are targeted, strategic strikes against the Egyptian pantheon, their superstitions, and their nature worship.
Let's break some of those down, because the specific mechanisms really matter. Take the first plague.
The Nile turning to blood.
Yes. The Nile River wasn't just a water source. It was worshipped as the bloodstream of the god Osiris. It was the absolute life giver of Egypt.
So when Aaron strikes the water and it turns to blood, making it undrinkable and killing all the fish, Yahweh is demonstrating that he has absolute power over their source of life.
It's theological warfare.
Absolutely. Or the second, plague frogs.
Oh yeah, frogs.
The Egyptian goddess of fertility and childbirth, Hecate, was depicted with the head of a frog. By multiplying frogs until they are a rotting, suffocating plague in their ovens and beds, God takes their symbol of blessing and turns it into a curse.
That is brilliant.
Yeah.
And horrifying.
Exactly. And the plague of thick darkness is a direct assault on Ra, the sun god, the chief deity of the Egyptian pantheon.
So God is systematically proving that all the powers Pharaoh relies on are entirely impotent before the great I Am.
That's the whole point of the plagues.
But as we read through this intense battle, we slam into a massive obstacle to growth, a concept that is intensely uncomfortable for listeners today.
Yeah, we have to talk about the hardening of Pharaoh's heart.
We do. Because throughout the narrative of these plagues, the text repeatedly states that God hardened Pharaoh's heart so that he would not let the people go.
It's a tough pill to swallow.
I have to push back here on behalf of anyone listening. This sounds fundamentally unjust.
I get it.
If God is pulling the strings and hardening the man's heart, then Pharaoh doesn't actually have free will. It sounds like God is rigging the game just to manipulate a human being and show off his own destructive power. How do we reconcile that?
Well, that is probably the most difficult theological knot in the book of Exodus, and it has troubled readers for centuries.
Understandably.
But Matthew Henry provides a very careful reading of the text that offers vital clarification.
What's his take?
Henry points out the sequence of events. In the early plagues, the text says Pharaoh hardened his own heart.
Oh, so he started it.
Yes. He repeatedly looked at the evidence, shut up his compassion to the groans of the slaves, and stubbornly chose his pride.
So the initial hardening was entirely his own choice.
Yes, exactly. Henry explains that when the text later says God hardened his heart, it is describing a righteous judgment.
What does that mean practically?
It means God did not inject evil or stubbornness into an otherwise willing man. Rather, God essentially removed his restraining grace.
He just let go.
Yes. He gave Pharaoh up to his own pre-existing passions, his own pride, and his own greed. God just let Pharaoh's chosen arrogance run its full destructive course without intervening to stop him.
Okay, that makes much more sense. It's like a tragic Greek flaw.
Exactly like that.
Pharaoh is so deeply addicted to his own power and to the economy of Egypt, which relies entirely on free slave labor, that he cannot stop himself.
Even when it's destroying his country.
Right. Even after the plague of locusts, when his own advisors are begging him, screaming, "Don't you yet know that Egypt is destroyed? Let them go."
He still can't do it.
He's past the point of no return.
He has driven the car to the edge of the cliff. His foot is glued to the gas pedal of his own hubris. And God simply allows him to refuse to hit the brakes. That analogy perfectly captures the self-destructive nature of unchecked pride. And it offers us a powerful comparative insight into the nature of power itself.
How so?
If you contrast Pharaoh's power with God's power, you see two entirely different paradigms.
Okay.
Pharaoh's power is extractive, brutal, and insecure. It relies on hoarding wealth, building massive monuments to himself through the forced labor of the vulnerable.
Very dictatorial.
Right. But God's power, as displayed through Moses, is liberating. It demands freedom, justice, and the release of the marginalized.
It insists that people must be freed from the machinery of empires so they can go into the wilderness and find spiritual fulfillment through worship.
Exactly. Which brings us to the climax of this entire narrative.
The final blow.
The final blow that shatters Pharaoh's resistance.
Yeah.
The narrative shifts to the institution of the Passover.
Before the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn, strikes, God gives Moses incredibly specific instructions for a ritual that will define the identity of the Israelites forever.
The instructions are very precise.
God commands every Hebrew household to take a lamb without blemish, sacrifice it, and paint its blood on the doorposts and the lintels of their homes.
And they are to roast the meat and eat it that very night.
But they have to eat it in a specific posture.
Right, in haste, with their belts fastened, their sandals on their feet, and their walking staffs in their hands. They have to eat it like people ready to sprint out the door.
And that night, a destroying agent passes through the land, striking the firstborn of every Egyptian house, from Pharaoh's palace to the lowest dungeon.
But the destroyer passes over any house marked by the blood of the lamb.
The psychological weight of that night is unimaginable. The text says there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead.
It is devastating.
It really is. But God insists that the Israelites must never forget what happened. He commands them to observe this feast of Passover as a permanent memorial every single year.
And there's a specific reason for that.
Why is the ritual so important?
Matthew Henry says it beautifully. God's service is reasonable, and it is then acceptable when we perform it intelligently.
Meaning?
The ritual of the Passover wasn't meant to be mindless tradition. It was intentionally designed to be strange enough to spark questions from the next generation.
I see.
God explicitly says that when their children ask, "What do you mean by this service?" the parents are to recount the entire story of their liberation from slavery.
The ritual is a tactile mechanism to ensure the history of their deliverance is never lost.
Exactly. And they need that history anchored in their bones because the transition into freedom proves to be incredibly volatile.
Boy, does it. The plague breaks Pharaoh. He summons Moses and Aaron in the middle of the night and screams at them to take their people and get out.
And they leave.
The Israelites march out, hundreds of thousands of them, carrying the wealth of Egypt that the terrified Egyptians practically threw at them to hasten their departure.
They are finally free.
But almost instantly, the plot twists again.
Pharaoh changes his mind.
Because he realizes the catastrophic economic reality of what he just did. He just let his entire free labor force walk away. His pride flares one last time. He marshals his elite chariots and he chases them down.
And he catches them at the absolute worst geographic choke point.
The Red Sea.
The Israelites are camped by the sea. They have mountains flanking them, an impassable ocean in front of them, and the most terrifying advanced military machine in the ancient world bearing down on their rear.
And the Israelites absolutely lose their minds with terror.
They completely panic.
They turn on Moses with a viciousness that is hard to read. They scream, "Because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Didn't we tell you in Egypt, leave us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians?"
They actually say it would have been better to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness.
It is a breathtaking lack of faith, especially considering they just watched the systematic dismantling of the Egyptian empire on their behalf.
Henry calls their reaction a sordid contempt of liberty, preferring servitude before it.
They are completely paralyzed by fear.
But God tells Moses to stop crying out and to tell the people to go forward.
How do you go forward into an ocean?
Well, Moses stretches his rod over the sea. A strong east wind blows all night, and the waters miraculously divide. The Israelites cross on dry ground with walls of water on their right and left.
It's the ultimate cinematic moment.
It truly is. And the Egyptian army recklessly pursues them right into the seabed.
But the wheels fall off their chariots, causing panic. God tells Moses to stretch out his hand again, the waters crash back down, and the entire pursuing army is drowned.
The absolute finality of it is stunning.
And chapter 15 gives us the incredible song of Moses and Miriam. They are singing, "I will sing to Yahweh, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea."
Miriam is leading the women in a dance with tambourines. They have experienced the ultimate, undeniable victory.
But the narrative doesn't stop with the dancing. And this is where the text holds up a deeply uncomfortable mirror to human nature.
Yeah, this part is incredibly humbling.
Just 3 days after this miraculous universe-altering deliverance, they are marching in the wilderness of Shur. They ran out of water.
They are thirsty.
They finally spot an oasis called Mara, but when they rush to drink, the water is bitter and toxic.
And what is their immediate reaction?
Do they pray? Do they trust the God who just split an ocean?
No.
No. They instantly revert to complaining. They murmur against Moses, saying, "What shall we drink?" I look at this, and I think they're experiencing the ultimate case of buyer's remorse.
Oh, completely.
They literally walked through walls of water 3 days ago, but the moment they face a logistical challenge, the moment they get thirsty, they panic.
It makes you wonder.
Why is human nature so deeply wired to prefer the predictable misery of our past over the unpredictable freedom of our future?
Because freedom requires responsibility. And faith requires navigating uncertainty. Back in Egypt, their lives were horrific, but they were planned. They knew exactly what the quota was, they knew what time the beatings happened, and they knew where their meager rations were coming from.
The wilderness, by contrast, is entirely unknown.
It requires daily trust. Matthew Henry makes a poignant observation about the bitter water at Mara.
What does he say?
He says, God can embitter that to us from which we promise ourselves most satisfaction, that our wants and disappointments in the creature may drive us to the Creator.
Wow.
God instructs Moses to throw a specific piece of wood into the water, and it becomes sweet, proving once again that he can provide.
But the psychological damage of slavery is clearly deeply ingrained in them.
It really is.
And that leads to the final Critical reflection question for you, the listener.
This is the core application.
As you look at your own life, what Egypt are you secretly longing to return to simply because the wilderness of your current growth is uncomfortable?
We all have one.
Maybe it's a toxic relationship that you finally escaped, but now you feel lonely, so you want to go back.
Or maybe it's a dead-end job that made you miserable, but it felt secure and the new business you started is terrifying.
How do you stop yourself from running back to the brick kilns?
The answer lies in the Passover principle we discussed earlier. You have to set up memorials.
Exactly. You need tangible reminders of your past victories. You have to consciously remind yourself of the misery of Egypt and the miracles God or life has provided to get you out.
You need those memorials to keep you from panicking when you hit a dead end like the Red Sea.
Or when the water tastes bitter at Marah.
Because if you don't deliberately remember why you left, the fear of the unknown will always convince you that slavery wasn't actually that bad.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. The physical journey out of Egypt, the actual walking from Goshen through the sea and into the wilderness, took a matter of days.
Very fast.
But the psychological journey to get Egypt out of the Israelites,
Yeah.
to strip away the slave mentality, that would take 40 years of wandering in the desert.
It would literally require an entire generation to pass away.
When we seek major life changes, when we ask to be delivered from our bad habits or our toxic environments, are we truly prepared for the long, internal, psychological wilderness required to actually adapt to our new freedom?
It is the profound difference between a change of location and a change of identity. One happens overnight. The other takes a lifetime of deliberate, often painful rewriting of who we are.
That's the heart of this section. This is wisdom for the present, where understanding leads to clarity, and clarity shapes how we see and live. We'll see you in the next episode.